concluding that our borders are very vulnerable. And I want to say that Tobago, not disclosed here in the figures, are even more vulnerable because we cannot even have one vessel stationed in Tobago. And I heard the minority leader championing the cause of the PNM and the wonderful work they are doing and so on. But this is a result of having in office a gentleman manning one of the most important ministries in Trinidad and Tobago, who goes to the BTAM and had to run away from water. So you could expect nothing more from this. And I want to go on later to say that this porous borders might even be a strategic action by the government in place. Deliberate strategic action.
Deliberate.
I am not giving way.
45-8, Madam Presiding Officer.
I qualified my statement by saying might, and if you listen to the English, then you'd understand. It might be a strategic decision, and I'll bring the supporting documents information soon. The right to life, the right to liberty, and the right to security of every individual in Tobago is a basic human right recognized by the United Nations Declaration of 1948 and enshrined in the Trinidad and Tobago Constitution at Section 4A. I hope today to demonstrate within my 34 minutes that we in Tobago, for us in Tobago, we have never been able to enjoy that right simply because the Assembly shall have no responsibility. How do you go to the Parliament and say, and allow to be read into law, that the entity that governs a jurisdiction of Trinidad and Tobago, and say that you will have no right? It reminds me of when I was a little boy and I went to Trinidad and I saw this Churchill Roosevelt man name on the highway in Trinidad, and I asked my bigger siblings, who is Churchill Roosevelt? And they told me that that man was the Prime Minister of England who caused millions to die in India while they used their security forces to ensure that the grain produced in India was being shipped to England and everybody in India was starving. That is the result when you have a law that says the Assembly shall have no responsibility. And that is where we are headed if we continue to allow foolish laws to be made. So I hope to demonstrate that the time is now. The time is now when we as Tobagonians, including my brother from Bacalet, from Darrell Spring Wim, the time is now, because I hope for him still, I know Pastor Baines. The time is now when all Tobagonians must stand up and take the responsibility of being in government in Tobago and do it manfully and understand that you cannot, SOE or no SOE, you cannot allow your security to be governed from abroad We've gone through that through colonialism. You cannot allow it, because every jurisdiction that you have in the world where security is being managed from outside of your borders, you are prone to this non-functional security system that threatens your life, your liberty, and your social well-being. Now, first thing that comes to mind when we talk about national security, we think naturally of police, inland security, defense force, maybe external security. We talk about political security, and members here will know that as politicians, we have no security, because I see the minority leader has his own security now, but we on this side have no security, right? Then, then we talk about border security. We might even consider energy and economic security, because just like Churchill, Roosevelt, the government in Trinidad, I almost say Rowley, but the government in Trinidad is taking our energy resources and giving us crumbs. Sometimes they give us none and leave us to starve. We can talk about natural resource security. You know, they want to come and take the quarry in Studley Park. All of these areas of security are interrelated and are components of this complex thing that we call national security. A man in Mount Grace told me the other day that poor border security has impaired internal security in Tobago and has imperiled the demographic security and is now threatening economic security. If we have no responsibility on this island of Tobago, we cannot control the economy of Tobago, and that is the crux of the matter. The problem we face is not who controls national security and who gives more money. The problem we face is that, much like the Palestinians, people from outside our borders are controlling our security and determining for us what we should do and when we should do it. This problem that we face is not a now problem. 30 years after the annexation of Tobago to Trinidad, 30 years. It took 30 years for a ship to leave Port of Spain from Trinidad to come to Tobago. Our entire economic security disappeared, because before that, ships were leaving the Lesser Antilles, coming down the road to Grenada and St. Vincent, coming down the road, stopping in Tobago, and then going to Trinidad. 30 years it took for them to send a ship the other direction, when they decided that it was legal for those ships to stop off in Tobago. And that is where we are even up to today. You can import nothing until you go to Trinidad first. And then they turn around in government and they say to you, we know your cost of living in Tobago is higher, and it's costing you 40% more to build your house, but we still charging you the same tax because we are one country. This thing is about ensuring, when the member for Bethel New Grange says we must do all in our power for regime change, it is because we understand that if the status quo continues as it is, our children and grandchildren are doomed forever. And I hope my friend from Darrell Spring Rim, who has young children, understands this. And when you support a Trinidad party against Tobagonians, know what you're doing. Let me turn to what the numbers are saying. These are the numbers. The murder numbers, the murder figures in Trinidad and Tobago, before the PNM came into office in 2015, as far as I could have gone back, for the 3 years before 2015, 2013, 2014, 2015, the average murder rate in Tobago was 6.3 murders per year. From 2017 to 2024, the average murder rate was 11.2, meaning that it increased every year by 4. That is not a question for anybody to say that is the Chief Secretary in Tobago responsibility or Heinz responsibility. The reality is that the law says the assembly shall have no responsibility. In Trinidad, the average murder rate from 2013 to 2015 was 410. And despite the COVID years, the average murder rate from 2016 to 2024 rose to 509. Meaning that every year there were 99 more murders under the PNM. Every year, the increase in Trinidad is 24% on average. In Tobago, the increase is 77%. That is why we come to the House today, understanding where we are, to make an intervention, because we know we have a dotage law. And if no intervention is made, not only the young man who went to Signal Hill, but scores of young men are going to be murdered in Tobago. And it is our responsibility, and we are man enough to come to the House to say, let us have our highest office meet with the minister, instead of the Prime Minister. Let us have him meet with the Minister of National Security and say, hey, brother, might be Rasta to Rasta, because you follow the Rasta. Meet. Because you know that the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago acknowledges that the Minister of National Security is unable to carry out the functions. So he give him another minister. And together, the murder rate still increased to 624. When you had two ministers. It's two Rastas? One is that short Rasta? Picky head Rasta. So, when the chief talks about the THA expending 5th schedule money on 6 schedule items, because we care, and the ministry, members of the ministry come to us and say, here what's going on. We ain't get nothing from Trinidad. Give you something. It will benefit you in the end. And we do. In 2024-2025 budget, and I had the figures back to 2016, but I want to be short because I am understanding that I may have to speak about some contractors again later. The budget statement for 2024-25, Ministry of National Security is going to get 10.2% of the national budget. Their development budget, and this is where the expenditure is. Their development budget is $1.4 billion. And they will say billion dollars. 7 times more than the entire Tobago development budget. Because I want that to sink in. 7 times more. And we still have to go and rent vehicle for them. It vexatious. It vexatious. The TTPS, my good friends who like to come to my house, their budget in 2025 is $2.6 billion. And I don't want Tobagonians to understand, $2.6 billion, representing 4.1% of the Trinidad and Tobago budget. The Secretary of Finance will probably remind me that our percentage is 4.0 something. This year is 4.2, 4.35 this year. The TTPS budget is 4.1%. And they go to the parliament every single year and they boast. This year, they boast that the TTPS will spend money in Tobago. Improvement works at police stations and buildings, $1.5 million. No, tell me. Works are planned for Charlottesville, Crown Point, Moriah, and maybe the Chief Secretary will monitor these things. Moriah Police Station, Roxborough Police Station, Scarborough Police Station, Shervan Road Police Station. All of that for $1.5 million. I don't know what they're improving. They must go and buy some office share for them. Development works for the K9 and Mounted Branch Unit in Tobago at Shervan, $800,000. That should include construction of stables and for the Mounted Branch kennels and Tobago specific allocation identified in the budget, $2.8 million. They give them $2.6 billion. And they tell us no responsibility, and then tell the TTPS, spend $2.8 million into it. This is where we are. The Coast Guard, in the budget from 2023, no specific allocation mentioned in 2023, $0. The chief talked about them scrunching down there. In 2024, $500,000 to upgrade electrical utility at the base. In 2025, chief, that was spent $500,000. Because I'm sure I sent electricians over there many times. 2025, $2 million for the Coast Guard upgrade. Defense Force in 2023, $0 mentioned. In 2024, $0 mentioned. In 2025, $200,000 to construct a dormitory in Camp Signal Hill. Are they serious about preventing crime in Tobago? Absolutely not. And they're telling us every single year in the budget, hey, we ain't had nothing to do with all over there. We're giving only the bare minimum. Fire service. Remember talk about building a fire station in Roxborough that barely functioning. 2023, no money allocated. 2024, no money allocated. In 2025, $1 million to the Crown Point Fire Station because they're building an airport, So they had to get 2 new appliances to show. Because this could only buy 1 appliance, by the way. $1 million, but even can't buy 1. Prison facilities in Tobago, according to them in the budget, 2023, $0. 2024, $0. 2025, $0. Total monies supposedly allocated for Tobago-specific expenditure through the Ministry of National Security in 2023, $0. In 2024, $503,500, and in 2025 projected $3.2 million. We have been abandoned, our security has been abandoned, and now we must take time. We have to fix our own selves. I keep saying that. If we don't fix it, certainly this PNM government ain't fixing it. That's what the reality is. So when we sit and we strategize and we say we must bring a motion because of the fact that we are in the SOE and we feel we'll have the greatest impact in the public space, because we understand that without an intervention from us, nothing will be done. And we have, how much of them we have? We say about 10 of them now. Because every week, the Prime Minister adding another Tobagonian, whether they lose in Tobago or not, he putting them in the highest office of the land to make laws for us when people in Tobago reject them. And we have two representatives who are like mumus down there. Can't even ask, oh gosh, build the Coast Guard base now, get them a boat at least now. They can't even say that. They say that, they get fired one time. So, what is required? What is required if we are to arrest this crime scourge that we are on? What is required from the Ministry of National Security? We must first find a way to ensure that our borders are protected. That's the first thing. And to do that, I'm suggesting that we employ a view-shed analysis immediately. And I know the minority leader on the phone now probably check
Member,
what
you
that
have
means.
5 minutes.
We must employ a view-shed analysis immediately so that we can find where we must put towers in Tobago so we can see every coastline in Tobago, and we might end up seeing inland areas such as Golden Lane and Plymouth and so on as well. We must ask ourselves, in this modern time, how many cameras we really have working? We can't come up with a system all of these years to see what's going on the ground in Tobago. We have the opportunity in Tobago. We have a controlled experiment. We have a small population, a small island. We are inhabiting 10-15% of the island, and we still can't see. We have no radar, no satellite, no boat, no police, no army, no coast guard. If we do not change these foolish laws that they make in the parliament and ensure that the decisions for national security are made on the ground in Tobago and are controlled from Tobago, then we would have abdicated our responsibilities to the people of Tobago, and we are saying we are big men enough to understand that we must make an intervention now, and therefore I stand resolutely in support of this motion to have the Chief Secretary meet with the Minister of National Security and hammer out an MOU where we can both, as government officials, reduce the crime scourge that is plaguing our wonderfully beautiful island. I thank you.
Minority Councillor, you may now join this debate.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer, for the opportunity to join the debate in response to the motion before us. Madam Presiding Officer, on the surface, the motion purports to address the urgent security and crime issues and concerns that we have in Tobago. And of course, these concerns are real, and we all feel the scourge of crime. Crime currently on our sister island, Tobago, is at its record. It's at its record high, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer,
Allow her members, allow Minority Councillor to make her presentation uninterrupted. Minority Councillor, continue.
thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, I want to address some of the comments that would have been laid earlier in the debate. And Madam Presiding Officer, the member and the Secretary of Infrastructure spoke a while ago about, and he detailed the allocations of national security in Tobago and went on to say there are a number of years where there was no allocation to Tobago. But Madam Presiding Officer, as far as I'm aware, there are police stations all throughout Tobago. Those police stations are staffed with personnel. Similarly, Coast Guard, similarly, the prisons, similarly, fire. So, Madam Presiding Officer, is it that the Tobago House of Assembly is paying the workers of national security that are in Tobago, or Madam Presiding Officer, are they working for free? Because it is very, Madam Presiding.
What is the point of order? What is the point of order, Madam Presiding Officer?
Point of order, he stood on a point of order.
But what is the point
She
of
has
order?
to sit.
Yeah, but what is the point of order?
Minority Leader, I would never allow you to speak to me like
I'm
that.
asking a question.
I would not allow you to speak to me like that.
What is the point of order? They could do whatever they want over there. They're talking whenever.
Let me just say, make this very clear. I am very disappointed in everyone here. The matter of security on this island is a serious issue, and it seems as if it is being taken for a joke. This is the people's business, and it should be treated with this seriousness. It affects every Tobagonian. Why aren't we taking this seriously? I would hope that moving forward, that your contributions would reflect such. Member, continue.
Madam Presiding Officer, I do not wish to be misquoted. I just spoke.
Point of clarity.
Point of clarity. I said
Thank you. Can you clarify, please, member, please?
I said
Member.
that the development budget for the Ministry of National Security was $1.2, $1.4 billion this year, and I was quoting figures for the development budget. So recurrent expenditure to pay salaries is not a concern that we have. Development budget, what I spoke about. So don't misquote me. If you want to quote me, quote what I say.
Member, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I didn't quote the member. So, Madam Presiding Officer, the point I am making is that there is expenditure in Tobago in relation to national security. And I also want to place on the record, Madam Presiding Officer, that it is our information, because members opposite also spoke to the whole issue of the Coast Guard and having inadequate border patrols, but it is our information, Madam Presiding Officer, that there are some vessels that are currently on dry dock that will be returning soon, and one of those vessels will be assigned to Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, again, although this motion may appear to address the issue of security in Tobago, it is clear, Madam Presiding Officer, from the comments and all those who would have contributed on the other side to the debate so far, it's an attempt to politicize such a serious issue as crime. Madam Presiding Officer, the Chief Secretary brought a motion to this House to ask this House to agree for a memorandum of understanding between him and the Ministry of National Security. Madam Presiding Officer, if you may recall, right in this said House, in October of last year, a motion was brought by the minority, was amended by the majority side to indicate that let us all come together to have bipartisan talks and to come together as members of this House. The motion was approved unanimously by all members of the House, Madam Presiding Officer, and yet the Chief Secretary went and did his own thing. The Chief Secretary came, but yes, he wasn't in the House at the time, but Madam Presiding Officer, the Deputy Chief Secretary, would have led the charge, and she would have brought the amendments before this House that was voted unanimously. Even the minority leader, because of what was decided, wrote to the Chief Secretary informing and advising, just in case he was not speaking to his colleagues, informing him of what would have transpired in the House and the decision of the House. And yet still, the Chief Secretary decided to go on his own accord, convene a committee, never even came back to us to say, let us, or reached out to the minister, reach out to the parliament, reach out to the prime minister to have these bipartisan talks. So, Madam Presiding Officer, some months later, to come to the House to ask for approval to have some memorandum of understanding is clear political games and gimmickry. And on private members' motion, when they came into office, they indicated that they will be doing things differently and we will be meeting several times throughout a month. 1 out of 3 months where we have private members, this administration decided that they would bring a motion. Madam Presiding Officer, I continue. We are speaking about resources. In case we forgot, Madam Presiding Officer, this administration, when compared to previous administration, has received an increased allocation year on year from the time that they came into office. The minority leader was making the point when the member for the Assistant Secretary of Infrastructure was speaking, and the member would have indicated and he would have quoted the amount spent by the Tobago House of Assembly on national security in Tobago. And the member quoted 2021, the sum, 2021, sorry, the sum of $950 being spent, 950,000, sorry, to cover housing and transportation. 2022, 720,000, 2023, 740, and 2024, 780. And he would have cumulated the figures. But what the point that the minority leader was attempting to make, that the financial year runs from October 1 to September 30th. So the financial year ended 2021 would have been a financial year under the People's National Movement. And that is all that the minority leader was attempting. And based on the information that was laid here by the member, in 2021, there was the highest spent out of all the 3 years. In 2021, the amount spent on national security in Tobago is $950,000. And when you compare that to the allocation that was received then was less than what the current administration received while they have been in office. So to speak about the central government don't like Tobago and the central government is sort of treating Tobago as a bastard child because of them. Madam Presiding Officer, is about priorities. And this is not the first administration that is seeking to prioritize the spend on national security in Tobago. It has come from successive administrations of the Tobago House of Assembly because it is understood this is an important issue. So, Madam Presiding Officer, it is troubling to see that we are politicizing this issue. Additionally, Madam Presiding Officer, if we want to talk about additional resources, the Chief Secretary, we are just coming out of a debate in relation, or the conclusion of a debate in relation to greater autonomy for Tobago and increase resources, financial resources for Tobago, Madam Presiding Officer. The Chief Secretary single-handedly, Madam Presiding Officer, stood in the way of Tobago getting greater resources and greater autonomy. Madam Presiding Officer, with the passage of those bills, this administration would have received in excess of $1 billion on its allocation. So it is quite troubling to hear the Chief Secretary and this administration talking about increased allocation and increased resources when you, with your own hand, squandered that away. And I want to remind Tobago that it was the Chief Secretary had 3 years plus in office to send its recommendations to the Parliament, to send its recommendations to members on both sides. Yet the Chief Secretary waited, and even we had a motion here to say let us come into bipartisan talks to address the issue. That was ignored. The Chief Secretary waited until the day of the debate, mere moments, to send an aid memoir to his friends in the UNC and to send a text message to the Prime Minister indicating that he has issues with the bills. And if you look to the end of the aid memoir, the Chief Secretary indicated that not to proceed with the bills. So, Madam Presiding Officer, when we are speaking about increased allocation,
45-5, Madam Presiding Officer. The minority councillor, again.
he didn't say he was standing on a point of order.
45-5. The minority councillor, again, is imputing improper motives associating this administration with the UNC. They continue to do that, Madam Presiding Officer, I'm reminding. They continue, and I'm asking that that statement be, our friends in the UNC, I'm asking that that statement be retracted.
You all are friends?
I am, and Madam Presiding Officer, can I also say that I'm addressing you, I'm not addressing the minority leader, and I'm waiting for you to make a pronouncement on the thing, and not the minority leader.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. So, as I continue, Madam Presiding Officer, if we wanted greater allocation to the Tobago House of Assembly that we are seeking, one of the very ways that could have been explored, that was right before us, that the mechanisms were in place for us to address that, was the passage of those autonomy bills, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, the Chief Secretary would have spoken about some of the social safety net or social policies that they have had in place to deal with crime. And yes, we understand that crime is also a social issue. And we all have a part to play in terms of the reduction on crime and how to address crime and criminal activity on the island. But Madam Presiding Officer, the policies of this administration may have contributed to the escalation of crime on the island. Madam Presiding Officer, we have to deal with the root cause of crime and criminal activity. And I am asking the question because, again, some of the policies of this administration has brought great hardship to members of our community in Tobago. And Madam Presiding Officer, it is being reported from members of the public that the social safety net mechanisms in terms of issuance of grants, the accessibility to those grants based on the reports from citizens of Tobago have indicated that it is becoming increasingly more difficult to access that social security support. Madam Presiding Officer, when it comes to sporting activities and sporting facilities for young people on our island, we have instances where the Goodwood Pavilion, the indoor sporting facility, the community center in Charlottesville, all those things remain untouched, languishing since this administration has come into office. And these are facilities that could have been utilized. You hear the young men in Goodwood complaining that they have not had access to this facility in years. And Madam Presiding Officer, these are the productive ways that we could engage young people to take them off the street and have them involved in productive activity. We also have a situation with the blacklisting of our Tobago contractors that employed thousands of Tobagonians, Madam Presiding Officer. Where are the persons who were employed with these Tobago contractors? Where are they today? And Madam Presiding Officer, that is why we on the minority are concerned by some of the policies of this administration and whether or not they are contributing towards the increase in crime and criminal activity. The other thing, Madam Presiding Officer, the motion is calling again for increased allocation, and it seems to be calling for increased responsibility. Because the Chief Secretary said that with the MOU, the THA wants to be responsible for certain aspects of national security in Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, the track record of this administration is that they are unable to adequately manage what they currently have. So you're now asking for more leeway to do things that you can't currently manage? What this administration needs to do, Madam Presiding Officer, and I'm recommending, is that the areas that they have responsibility for, manage that properly. Account for that, be transparent, spend the money of the hard-working citizens of Tobago in a prudent manner, Madam Presiding Officer. And if you do that, then and prioritize properly, then you will see the increased allocation year on year, the increased allocation from 2022 of 2.35 billion to 2023 of 2.52 billion, an increase of 164 million. the increased allocation in 2024 of 2.58 billion, an increase of 64, and then a further increase of 2025 of 2.55. Let us manage that in the best interests of Tobagonians. So, Madam Presiding Officer, there is a call for leadership. There's a call for leadership in Tobago, Madam Presiding Officer. And this administration seems not to be providing the governance that Tobagonians want and need and deserve and what they promised. So, Madam Presiding Officer, as I indicated before, addressing the issues of the island's security requires more than stopgap measures or political grandstanding. It requires a genuine effort to build bipartisan consensus and engage all sectors of society. Crime affects us all, Madam Presiding Officer, and solving it demands collaboration, transparency, and accountability. So, Madam Presiding Officer, as I said, crime is a matter that affects every resident and citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. And we need a unified and collaborative approach to deal with such an issue. And it is quite disappointing that the Chief Secretary has chosen to stroke discord on such a critical issue of safety and well-being of our people. And Madam Presiding Officer, I want us to note as well that the THA Act already provides the Chief Secretary to interact directly with the ministers in matters relating to Tobago. And Madam Presiding Officer, we would have seen it in the past. We would have seen where the Chief Secretary would have met with the Prime Minister and other members of the National Security Council. We would have also seen where the Chief Secretary met with the Minister of National Security and Minister in the Ministry. So, Madam Presiding Officer, there's nothing preventing the Chief Secretary currently from having these conversations and entering into these bipartisan talks. So, Madam Presiding Officer, I want to conclude. And we just got word, Madam Presiding Officer, because the Chief Secretary would have spoken about the prisons. And Madam Presiding Officer, it has been brought to the attention of the minority that in relation to the prisons and a space to relocate the prisons, the minister is awaiting a feedback or a return call from the Chief Secretary in relation to those matters. So, Madam Presiding Officer, I want to encourage the Chief Secretary to return the calls of the minister as it relates to finding a suitable...
Member, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. As it relates to finding a suitable location for the prisons, the minister is waiting on the Chief Secretary. So again, Madam Presiding Officer, as I conclude, we are all, crime affects us all, and we all have to be a part of the solution. Let us stop playing the politicking with crime and criminal activity, because it is here. It is real and it affects us all. I think we all cringe particularly when we heard about the murder of a 15-year-old school child, Madam Presiding Officer. And it is reported that another school child is being charged for such activity. So, Madam Presiding Officer, I'm encouraging that let us all work together and stop politicking such a serious issue. I thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Assemblyman Clark, you may now join the debate.
I want to thank you. I want to thank the residents of Lambo Lowlands for this opportunity, not only in representing them in this house, but in representing them totally for the past 3 years. I want to seek your permission on 42.7 that I may read parts of my presentation with your lovely permission.
Your leave has been granted.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, I rise to address this critical motion, this motion on crime. And it can't be stated enough at the impact crime has had on all of us. And sometimes we sit in the house, sometimes you watch on TV in the National Parliament, and you see the back and forth all the time. I don't know where the notion came from, but it's an old story. Anytime you stand in opposition in the Tobago space, you align with the UNC. True. I don't know, the Chief Secretary, probably I don't know what he does on his private time, but I know I never align with no UNC. I don't know what any other member you do on their private time, but it seems like anytime you stand in this house opposed to anything that the government in the parliament does, you align with the UNC or any party that sits in opposition if they are in government. We have numbers before us, Madam Presiding Officer. And these numbers don't only show an increase in crime in Tobago for us to sit here and think that it's Tobago alone matters. It shows an increase across the national landscape. And while the minority, it's okay to stand and say that we could always find, when something goes wrong, we could always find 1,001 reasons why it went wrong and why it could have gone wrong. I choose instead to look at possible solutions. I just quote a couple of years here. In 2020, the murders was 396. That's nationally. We had 10 in Tobago. In 21, it was 448. We had 7 in Tobago. In 22, it was 604. We had 10 in Tobago. In 23, it was 575. We had 14 in Tobago. And in the just concluded 2024, we had 624. We had 26 in Tobago. If you want to assume that the THA has problems or contributing to the upsurge of crime in Tobago, then I want to humbly suggest that the problem is even larger in Trinidad. Right? Mr. Minority, with all due respect, I'm sure since we're in this house for the 3 years I sit here, I listen to you, I listen to the Minority Council, and never said a word to you all. Because I give you the respect that I wish you could give me, but I stayed silent, so I humbly ask you to follow suit. I don't jump up and talk nothing when you're talking. I allow you to talk because the House is here for us all to talk. So, Madam Presiding Officer, it's not only in Tobago we saw an upsurge in crime. It's across the board. And it's a little kind of emotional for me when we talk about crime. Because you say we can't say lie in the House, so I wouldn't say that, I say untruth. When one of the biggest untruth people could come to you with, and mind you, it's with good intentions. If somebody for you passed away, regardless of the condition they pass away under, come and say, boy, I know how you feel. So your mother died and somebody tell you, girl, I know how you feel. But your mother alive, how you could know how I feel? I lost a brother through gun violence. I know how we feel. And I don't wish that feeling on nobody. And instead of coming here day in and day out, and who gonna blame who and who gonna say what and how we gonna be, some of the things that could attend to Tobago's problem, we have other problems that contribute to things the way they are. We have to understand that the reality of our situation in Tobago, one of our biggest realities is that we have a very poor work ethic. Some people might say it's not politically smart to say this now, but you know what is the truth. We have a very poor work ethic. And it's okay for the minority to sit there and talk about the condition of the grounds and the condition of any sporting facility. But the figures will tell that this THA in that Department of Community Development, Youth Development and Sport are spending more money to repair things that we constantly fixing over and over and over. Not because of lack of making the facility available to the citizens, because the facilities are there. We have a very high rate of vandalism on the island. It's gone, it's just like the crime, it's alarming. We also have another problem, Madam Presiding Officer. On each one of these grounds that are mentioned by the minority, there's a team of workers there. There's a team of workers there on a daily basis. I don't know which government could come and raise you up and put you, hold your hand, cut the grass, hold your hand, pick up the rubbish, hold your hand to do everything. Sometimes we need to just stop and start taking responsibility. And I'm talking about each and every individual. Because this situation that we find ourselves in, each and every individual, regardless of what color you wear, regardless of who you choose to support, regardless of who you choose to align with, all of us have a problem. And if we don't look at sensible ways to deal with it, it could only get bigger. Because every problem is a seed that we sow. And if you don't get rid of the bad seeds, it could only grow and get bigger. Sometimes I'm sick and tired of listening to all the things that are being said, not only about this administration, but to anybody that stands on the other side, to the government in Port of Spain. Also, Madam Presiding Officer, we have a situation where there's 2 Tobago representatives in the National Parliament. If we're talking about collaboration, which the minority seems to be very interested in, then let us collaborate and have dialogue with those two representatives that when they go there, they go to carry a Tobago position. It doesn't matter to me how we get it done. What matters is that we have to get it done. When we have problems, Madam Presiding Officer, sometimes we got to sit and try to get the origination of the problem in order to have a chance at solving the problem. So let's go back a little. Where did our crime rate start climbing so rapidly? Is it from the time that we said, for instance, like secondary school for all? Remember, on secondary school for all, soon after, or maybe just before, the youth camps went closed, the trade schools went closed. So what we have, Madam Presiding Officer, is we are succeeding in slowly raising a generation of unskilled people. And that in itself is a time bomb waiting to explode. That is not a Tobago problem. It is not an isolated Trinidad problem. It's a national problem. And the reasons why, if, for instance, you have a situation where you have a job here, there's a job available. That's okay, I forgive you, Madam Presiding Officer. It's okay, a little pretty interruption is good for the soul. That's okay. If you have a job and one person applies for the job, it's easy. If you have a job, it's one available space and 100 people apply. Somewhere along the line, you will have to raise the requirements. You have to, you just have to. So it's just normal in my mind that sometimes the situation with the social service line for assistance, as you get longer, the requirements will have to change. You could never please everybody or getting this assistance across to everybody that need it in time. It's a very harsh line when we look at one of the realities in life and say, on the way to solving it, we'll lose a few. That's just a harsh reality. Nobody wants to be in that few. You know, once I was watching a Western, and 8 men surround 1 man. And they say, you're dead today for sure. He said, yeah, but I'm going to take 2 with me. So who know they want to be the 2, just step up. And nobody didn't step up. Because nobody wants to be in the 2. Everybody that comes to you for support, nobody wants to be that one that was rejected or turned away. But sadly enough, somebody will at some time have to be turned away. Because you just don't have the resources to feed everybody every time. One Jamaican Prime Minister said, and I always remember, in some instances in life, you have to have cash to care. If you don't have the cash, you cannot care in certain ways. Madam Presiding Officer, the division that I am a part of is not standing idly by while things appear to be running away, running out of control. We are looking into the possibilities now of the training institution it had in Patience Hill, trying to work something out to acquire that building to reopen the trade institute there. So we are not standing idly by, we are looking for solutions. We are trying to make, providing, of course, we got the buy-in from the workers and we find a way to raise productivity. Because we're not performing good in our workplaces. And I'm not sure any government is responsible for that. Each and every one has a responsibility because you might be on Facebook, I am not. But you pay one of these people 2 hours later and you're sure to be on Facebook. But these same workers don't understand that I have a duty to rightfully earn that money that I say I'm working for. To come out, get there on time, to show up every day and actually to work. We have to change that attitude. And I'm not talking about any government because I'm not sure any government can. Each and every individual has to take that individual responsibility in order to start turning things around. We have a situation where for 3 years, the team that qualified to go abroad for Carifta Games, each and every one of the people from Tobago, the young people from Tobago that made that national team, this administration, because we understand that sometimes the sport is so expensive that the parents spend everything they have to ensure that the child have the things they want. We took the decision, the responsible decision, to fly a parent to the games for 3 years straight. This administration did that. Madam Presiding Officer, I'm going to go back and talk in this house already, but it seems like the minority forget. So I'm going to rewind and come again like what them DJ does say. We had a situation where the Chief Secretary and I sat in a meeting with UDCOT because they like to brand about this situation about the cultural complex, the Bacalet Indoor Complex. And I'm going to say it one more time, put it on the record. The truth about that indoor complex is that what was being built is not what's on the drawing. Right? It's something totally different. And being responsible, being a responsible administration that we are, all we did was said to UDCOT. I actually said it. Say, I am an engineer. Me and no draftsman who does drop the thing. But what I'm sure about, what you're building there is not what's on the paper here. Because that was plain to see. The results of that, Madam Presiding Officer, is that those very people showed up a week or 2 later and said we're not doing none again, just because we asked for accountability. You see, we like to talk about accountability and transparency. But the same people you ask, just explain to me what you're doing, because this ain't looking right to what going up there. That what going up there looking like a bird cage, and this here look like a nice building what should serve as a shelter for disaster and all these things. And the same minority will come here every day and talk about that thing. These people take nearly 2 years to sign over, do the legal signing over for that very thing. Likewise, the Goodwood Pavilion. Yes, sir. Politics. So, I am in the business of old talk. But let we don't come in the house and try to mislead people. Yes. I don't know what you and any one of my colleagues have, but I don't do it to you, don't try to do it to me. You could grumble, that is okay. Me and hearing, so go ahead. Madam Presiding Officer, the time has come for us all as a nation to understand this problem don't only go to your house and spare my own. Crime affects everybody. And if we don't get up and deal with it as a responsible people, it's just a matter of time before we start being trapped in the house by the things we put in to keep the burglars out. And I would be the last one at any time to come and rejoice in anybody's demise. But we see on the TV, we see on the news so regular that people have a little disaster in their house, a little fire, and because of the measures they put to keep the criminals out. It keep them so far in that they couldn't get out. We have to work together to remove those barricades from around all of us, because it's around all of us and it's closing in daily. We have to try to be a responsible people. I don't care when I get up in the morning and I breathe. I give thanks for that, but I don't care when I'm living nice and when I'm moving around properly and a pretty crime-free environment. I don't care who the government was that who did it. The thing is that the citizens enjoy a sense of freedom and a sense of living the way life should be. Yes. I don't care who do it. I don't care if it's PNM. I don't care if it's UNC. I don't care if it's you choose not to see. Any one of the things. The people of Trinidad and Tobago need to stand up now together, take responsibility. And each of us need to look at where we went wrong, where we are going wrong, and try to make that turn around. It's never too late to make it turn around. Else the crime will only get bigger, bigger, and start overpowering all of us. All of us will fall victim sooner or later to crime if we don't find a way to turn this around. Madam Presiding Officer, long time when you were small and you get in trouble home and your mommy say, when your father come home, you're going to see something. That was enough to make you stop. Yes. Or she said, I'll call the police for you. When a little 2-year-old child could turn around now, as they could talk and you tell them that and they call them now, then we know we're in trouble as a nation. I go tell your father and your he don't mind we here and they live here. Then we're in trouble. So even from the perspective of a male standing up to their responsibility, Madam Presiding Officer, is a measure of crime fighting, and no government could instruct you to do that. You have to do that as an individual, as a man. Stop being a male and start being a man. Our problems could never disappear. They would never go away if we choose to approach them the way we've been approaching them in the past. From experience, we could see that all that has been happening, Madam Presiding Officer, is the more we point and the more we blame and the more we look for excuse, the only thing that then stop growing is the problem. And it's going to take over all of us if we can wise up and start doing the right thing. Everything we do could affect how we live. Everything. And when you look at the crime situation again, we see from experience, we see from the statistics that it's not getting better. So it means that we're not, and then you could go further to the region. Different countries are experiencing different wavelengths of crime. Situation that sort of unprecedented. People seeing new high. Athletes are running faster, they're jumping higher, but the criminals are also raising the game. So everybody's stepping up. So if we all could step up in doing what is right, trying to be good, doing the right thing, I think we could have a foot in the door to start to say that we are successfully approaching the corner where we are dealing with crime. It's a situation where all of us has to take some of the blame somewhere along the line. And I'm not sure, Madam Presiding Officer, any government with any amount of allocation could do anything to solve this problem. This is no governmental problem again. What messed up in the past already messed up. You're watching me like you want to tell me 5 minutes? I reached there, Madam Presiding Officer? Oh, thank you. So, I am saying that this is just my plea. As I said before, I lost a brother and I don't wish it on nobody in here. Not the minority, not the clerk, not the officer, nobody. Because it is not a nice feeling, and it's something that sometimes, without counseling, without that support, you may never get over it. So I don't wish it on nobody. So I stand here saying that I will love to see the day that we could put the politics away and start dealing with the problem that could give us that chance to see a better Tobago and a better country. I look forward to the time when we could see a Tobago East and a Tobago West representative in Parliament. Doesn't care who they represent, but they're taking a Tobago position to Parliament. I really don't care what color they wear and what they do. What interests me is that you're coming out of Tobago with a Tobago position to make the situation better. That's all I require. That's all I would like to see, Madam Presiding Officer.
Member, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I was wondering when he would come. So, Madam Presiding Officer, I want to assure Tobago that from this administration, the division where I reside, the Division of Community Development, Youth Development and Sport, we continue to work to rid ourselves of some of the problems that we face. But it cannot be a divisional task alone. Each and everybody have to put their hand to the wheel. Each and everybody has to play a part. We have a situation, Madam Presiding Officer, where we train thousands of people every year. And no one could deny that, not even the minority. We train thousands of young people in Tobago every year, in all different skills. So it's not for lack of trying. We are trying. We are working. We will continue to do what we have to do in the best way that we can. But as I wrap up, Madam Presiding Officer, the problem we face, let us all stop making it political. Let us all understand that the first step to ending this problem and to dealing with it is simply going in front of the mirror and looking. Let us all address ourselves. Let us all take charge of the immediate families that we have charge of. Let the men in our society stand up and be the men and not be the males. Let us be the men. Let us do the things that men should do. Hold the families together, and in turn we could hold the society together, and we could hold the island together, and we could hold the country together. And if we work together, I have no doubt that we could make Tobago the greatest little island on the planet. I thank you, Madam President.
Assemblyman Sampson, you may now join this debate.
Madam Presiding Officer, allow me to use 42.7 in presenting parts of my presentation. Good evening to this esteemed House. Good
Leave
evening.
is granted.
All right. Good evening to the people of Bonaccord and Crown Point, whose strength I stand on this evening. Let me also take time to wish each and every one of my colleagues in here all the best for 2025. God's richest blessing and prosperity to you and your families. Madam Presiding Officer, as I join this debate this evening, not only in the capacity as the Secretary at Community Development, Youth Development and Sport, but also as a concerned Tobagonian, because we are all Tobagonians first and foremost. There's a saying that says, when the rain falls, it doesn't fall on one man's housetop. Madam Presiding Officer, it is no secret that our island has been disturbed by the recent spate of crime and lawlessness, because we need a united front. We need a united call for a better Tobago. And when I listen to the minority in their contribution today, they start talking about politicizing and politicizing and we politicizing. but they are the ones that have been politicizing because they come back with the same song from years ago. We are lying to the UNC, we are lying to the UNC. If it's one thing you must learn from December the 6th, 2021, that song is dead and gone and dusted. The motion presented addresses a pressing issue concerning the fundamental human rights to security and life, which is evidently being undermined by deteriorating crime situation in Trinidad and Tobago, particularly in Tobago. The escalating levels of violence and crime not only pose a threat to individual safety, but also disrupt the societal harmony that is characteristic of this island. When our very way of living has changed, I do not have to tell you how much trouble we are in. Because when you go back to past years, how we lived in Tobago, that peace, that love, that harmony, where you could have afforded to leave your house door open, go away for a day, 2 days, and come back, and everything is intact. No, that cannot happen anymore. As my humble colleague mentioned, we are living behind bars, and the things that we use to protect us are the things that are working against us now. And we need to get back to that place where we want to. And in order for us to get back to that place, we have to have a united front. We have to put aside party politics, the pettiness of it, and stand together as Tobagonians if we want to live in peace, comfort, and assured security. It is noteworthy to recognize that the House of Assembly is not responsible for items in the 6th schedule. It explicitly delineates national security as a domain outside the Assembly's responsibility. However, this does not prevent the Tobago House of Assembly from its obligation to contribute resources towards improving the security on the island. Although not mandated, the Assembly's proactive steps in providing necessary assistance, such as transportation, housing, equipment, just to name a few, reinforces its dedication to safeguarding the well-being of Tobagonians. Madam Presiding Officer, you will have to agree, this is commendable. The Assembly, with the little resources that we receive, try to take a little pittance from here, from there, to contribute towards these security services. So we can give prisons a little something, give police a little something, fire services a little something, Coast Guard a little something. Even according to the chief, sometimes we look for a pirogue to give them and all to go out and carry out their work. But we understand what we need here on the island to improve our security services. So we go above and beyond and take from the little pittance that we receive to add to them. Just ask the Secretary for Tourism, the spend for Carnival. Ask her how many times we have offered up THA vehicles and resources to ensure safe and successful events here on island. Madam Presiding Officer, as a responsible assembly, we also at our expense provide housing for the judiciary, immigration, and the defense force. Why? Because there are some non-negotiables, and security on the island happens to be one of them. Madam Presiding Officer, when last have you seen an army vehicle on patrol in our communities? Whatever happened to the community comfort patrol? These worked, but the central government, in all its wisdom and grandstanding, has brought us to this place. A place where the last safe haven in this twin island state is under siege from criminal forces that have expanded their operations to our beautiful space. And if it's one thing, I like to listen to interviews and look at the news to know what's happening. And in a recent interview, the Minister of National Security with Fazir Mohammed, in a question posed to him, yes, Fazir, is quoted as saying, it is here, it's in the Guardian. I could pull it up here for you to hear, because you like to find out where the quotes come from. Right? And in the question posed to him, he said, no, my duty is not to ensure that people feel safe and secure. When your national minister could respond by saying that, dog eat we bake soon. Madam Presiding Officer, let me be a bit more direct with our state in relation to crime. The present state of emergency reflects the inability and failure of the central government to adequately respond to the prolonged rise in criminal activity. With over 600 homicides recorded in the past year, the nation is grappling with the highest levels of violence in its history. Rather than acknowledging the severity of the situation and implementing comprehensive strategies, the central government has fallen short, leaving the nation and its residents vulnerable and insecure. More proof that the PNM-led central government has to go. They must go.
Yes.
Madam Presiding Officer, the crime situation is one we need to approach on a holistic front. In order to do so, we need to have a seat at the table of the Security Council. Both communication and fiscal support is necessary to put the measures in place to fight the crime, starting from a community standpoint. There appears to be a significant lack of communication and coordination in addressing national security issues, which has directly contributed to the ongoing crime crisis. It is deeply troubling that while the central government is mandated to oversee national security, it has failed to prioritize the necessary resources or create a structured plan to combat the rampant violence that is affecting the lives of our citizens. Conveniently, they know this is one country, and conveniently, they forget. The hypocrisy of the PNM now has a stench, and the people of this beloved island is sick of it. Madam Presiding Officer, as Secretary with responsibility for community development, youth development, and sports, which is where I believe crime prevention should start, I can state that we have several programs in place to address these crime issues we are faced with. Hence the reason we are calling on the central government to allocate us our fair share so we can address our crime situation, thus turning our youth from deviant activities. The division is ready to address this problem, but the central government's inadequate resource allocation not only affects the implementation of these programs, but also increases the chance of young persons turning to a life of crime due to lack of opportunities. At the division, we have had numerous opportunities for young persons. We have had a lot of programs, as stated by the Assistant Secretary, inclusive of Trade Trek, Macho, World of Work, the Yes Summer Internship for Youth, Community Capacity Building Workshops, just to name a few. With the implementations of these programs, with the right amount of resources to carry out these programs, I believe that we will be in the right direction. We will be heading in the right direction to deal with these criminal issues that we are faced with. Because if you look at some of the recent programs we have had, we have incorporated some prisoners in the programs. So some of them would have graduated from the electrical course, from the air conditioning course. So it just shows that this administration is a caring one and wants to ensure that when persons leave these facilities, they can be incorporated back into society, doing something meaningful and not getting back into a life of crime. Madam Presiding Officer, this unplanned, untimed call of a state of emergency has crippled our tourism product somewhat. The tourism industry, vital to Tobago's economy, has been impacted severely by the rise in crime. Tourists who once flocked our beautiful shores, known for its renowned beauty and tranquility, are now deterred by safety concerns, adversely affecting local businesses and livelihoods. Madam Presiding Officer, we the people of Tobago and this administration, led by our Chief Secretary, is calling on the National Security Minister to meet with us to put measures in place to address our crime concerns. Coming on a walkabout and masking the business community to buy vehicles for the police is not one of them. The urgent modernization and enhancement of national security infrastructure, inclusive of personnel, equipment, facilities, and technologies, must be seen as a priority for the central government. Furthermore, we are calling on the PNM-led central government to urgently increase resource allocation to give us our fight to control our right. Yes, autonomy, but the right way. Madam Presiding Officer, in closing, the crime crisis faced by Tobago underscores the failure of the central government to implement an effective national security framework. The motion presented is both timely and critical in ensuring the safety and security of our residents and must be acted upon immediately. We cannot stand by while the rights to life and safety of our people are jeopardized due to the inaction and neglect of those in governance. For Tobago to restore its peace, safety, and economic viability, urgent interventions from the central government are imperative. Once these interventions are made and the right measures are put in place, we will well be on our way to becoming the greatest little island on the planet. I thank you.
Assemblyman Brebner, you may now join the debate.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Maybe I should start by apologizing to my colleagues because I sat here, listened to the previous colleagues speak, and got inspired. And I am now on my feet again. I want to take this opportunity to thank the electoral district of Belgan-Glamorgan for having the confidence in me to represent them. But I think I want to extend that to the entire Tobago that allowed us to be in this place now, Madam Presiding Officer, where we can do something like this. And if you truly read the motion, Madam Presiding Officer, you would recognize that it actually does speak towards us critically thinking about this crime situation and us truly putting politics aside. Because it speaks to us doing in essence what the Tobago House of Assembly said, which was when there are items that require central government action, whoever is the government in Tobago should work closely with whoever is the government in Trinidad to ensure that whatever is done makes sense for the people of Tobago. Because we are a peculiar people, we are different. You know, we think about things differently, Madam Presiding Officer. But I wanted to stand today to talk about 3 areas where, as the Secretary with responsibility for health, wellness, and social protection, I think I needed to bring some clarity and some information to the population. For example, Madam Presiding Officer, as it relates to health, although the Tobago Regional Health Authority is the entity that is responsible for managing the provision of health care in Tobago, I am sure that many people do not know that the TTPS also has a Tobago health facility, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, I found this out because members of staff from the TTPS Tobago Health Facility have been having conversations, and we've been working through how we ensure that the people who are members of the TTPS can actually get the kind of medical service they require and not necessarily have to come into the hospital and the health center. And as a result, Madam Presiding Officer, I want to place on official record the fact that in addition to renting the vehicles and the space for people to stay and all of those things, in 2024, Madam Presiding Officer, out of our little pittance at the Division of Health, Wellness, and Social Protection, we actually provided support to the health facility that belongs to the TTPS in the sum of $157,991 of items. Now, in the grand scheme of things, when we are talking about a ministry that has a recurrent budget that is billions of dollars, this is not a lot of money. But the items that were needed, Madam Presiding Officer, were a bit to examine people. a chair so that we could be comfortable when we are sitting. Simple little things that we were able to say, if we work together, if we collaborate on this, then we can work through collectively how to ensure that when the police officers who are ill, they can get service at this facility, and then they don't need to come to the hospital, to the health center. And we were working through, okay, how do we get to the point of the things that that TTPS health facility cannot provide? How do we get to the point of now transitioning, ensuring that we do work collaboratively? So I wanted to just spend a little time and to place on Hansard the fact that this kind of collaboration, we've been doing it, and we've been doing it because we truly understand that even though they did run up in my house, the TTPS from Tobago are Tobagonians who we need to take care of. Madam Presiding Officer, another thing that comes up, and I kind of debated on whether I want to touch on this one or not, but it is the fact that the Minority Council continues to use this concept that unemployment is directly causing crime. When in fact, if you think through it, you would recognize that there are quite a lot of unemployed people who are not criminals. But the other thing is probably what concerns me even more. Because at the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, even though, for example, the minority leader and others keep speaking about the fact that this government, in their mind, sending home all of these people, we have actually, within the last, since we've been in this position, hired at the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, hundreds of people. And the sad thing about that is, we also recognize that even after we've hired some of these people, because we don't know who they are, I don't know who they are, my HCOs and my supervisors and so forth, they're the ones coming to me and telling me, but Dr. Faith, so from, he gained real trouble, boy. And this is somebody who, was hired a year, 2 years ago. So they are employed, but yet they're giving real trouble. We're having real challenges. We are, what can we do? Shall we start to implement the different kinds of programs in there so that we can meet them? So we are moving from just employment to almost having EAP and all of that ingrained in the system, which is kind of difficult to do on such a large scale, Madam Presiding Officer. But it goes to the fact that something else is happening. And even when you are employed, and even when you have a secure income, something else is happening. And that is not preventing some of those same individuals who are now gainfully employed, unionized, from doing the levels of criminality that we are seeing. That's the second thing I wanted to treat with. The third thing, and I promise this is going to be the last, is what is happening in social protection. And let me start by, again, it was repeated that this administration is making the process harder to get the grants and so forth. But if you remember, coincidentally, sometime between late 2021, Madam Presiding Officer, and early 2022, Madam Presiding Officer, the Ministry with responsibility for social welfare, which is, as I said, the ministry, made several drastic changes in policy, Madam Presiding Officer, that included a significant policy where if you were getting multiple types of grants, so if you were getting, for example, a disability grant on a food card, or you were getting a old age pension and the food card, that all of those recipients actually changed the policy because we realized there were so many people who were thrown off of the red one, who needed the support of the green, and we changed the policy to allow them to be on it for longer than normal, and for it to take into consideration the size of your family. So instead of just getting the 500, no matter whether you had 1 child or 10, we took into consideration the size of your family to determine what multiple of $500 food card you were going to get. But more important than that, Madam Presiding Officer, I think at the Department of Social Protection in December, we did something that I'm most proud to have been part of. The Victim and Witness Support Unit of the TTPS reached out to the division indicating that they wanted to have a sit-down. They wanted to have, in essence, a cry session for the families of those of us in Tobago who lost somebody to gun violence. So probably at the last sitting, Madam Presiding Officer, you probably realized that I was not here at the sitting in December when my colleagues were giving Christmas greetings. It is because at that time, Madam Presiding Officer, I chose to go to that session where we collaborated with the Victim and Witness Unit to meet with the families of those individuals who were killed over the period of 2024. And we came together and we met with them and we had our counselors there and we had our therapeutic making of candles and we had our let us just get together and cry this away kind of session. Because we recognize that if we do not start healing those who are hurt, Madam Presiding Officer, those hurt people will keep hurting people. And we made the commitment then, Madam Presiding Officer, to continue collaborating with the TTPS in that program to ensure that we continue working together, because the aim of that program, Madam Presiding Officer, is the fact that when the Victim and Witness Unit do the initial kind of interaction and counseling with the families, after a while, they only have a certain number of sessions that they can provide to them. And when they are done with what the TTPS can provide, we transition them smoothly, if they still need to the therapeutic counselors who are at the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection. And I say that, Madam Presiding Officer, because, again, we kind of have to figure out collectively what we really, really, really need to do to help solve this problem. And I am standing here proud to be a member of this administration who is willing to put all of it aside, even though they run up in my house, put all of it aside to say that this is what Tobago needs. And because this is what Tobago needs, we are willing to come together because this is what Tobago needs. And what we are asking for, Madam Presiding Officer, is for those on the other side to also see that this is what Tobago needs. And if all of us do the right thing for Tobago, we truly would become the greatest little island on the planet. And I hope that today is indeed one of those days that we are going to be proud of, because we did it, Madam Presiding Officer, for Tobago. I thank you.
Assemblyman Hackett, you may now join this debate.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I know my colleagues would not expect a debate such as this one without the area representative of Bethesda-Leketo, which also includes the village of Golden Lane, contributing to such a motion. This area representative also happens to be the Secretary of Education, Research and Technology, and so you would all expect that this will hold some significance to me. This debate, Madam Presiding Officer and colleagues, is not merely about words. I mean, a lot of us spoke today, but I really want us to understand that this is not merely about words. This debate must inspire action, decisive action more specifically. It must foster collaboration, and that is a key word of today, and it must be able to bring forward transformative solutions for this island of Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, as we all know, on January 4th, Tobago lost 15-year-old Beres Joseph, a young resident of Seaview, Golden Lane, and of course, my resident, to senseless violence. His murder, and it was the first recorded, and I hope the only one for the year, and we're praying no more, was not just another statistic. Madam Presiding Officer, it was a tragic loss of a child. Someone's son, someone's pride, someone's hope, someone's future. And Madam Presiding Officer, his death has left a family, a community, and an island grieving. Golden Lane, Madam Presiding Officer, where Beres Joseph called home, has been in the last 2 or 3 years identified as one of Tobago's hotspots, one of Tobago's crime hotspots. But this crisis is not isolated to Golden Lane. I am certain that all 15 area representatives can speak to areas in his or her community considered a crime block. We know of the activities that occur at particular areas at particular times of the day, and I'm certain that we can stand in here and say they are not unemployed. They are not all unemployed. Madam Presiding Officer, this crisis reflects a broader issue that threatens the very fabric of this island. And yet, amidst this tragedy, we hear accusations coming from the Minority Council suggesting that this administration is to blame for the upsurge of crime on this island. Madam Presiding Officer, contrary to the misleading, and we always get these misleading comments from the minority, and earlier today I heard one which I would address on this floor, the facts of crime in this country called Trinidad and Tobago tells a different story. In Tobago, more specifically, crime did not begin on the 6th of December, 2021. When this administration took office, Trinidad and Tobago had already been grappling with crime. As a matter of fact, post-COVID, we saw an upsurge. Madam Presiding Officer, for decades, this island, and it's no secret, has faced systematic issues: chronic underfunding of national security, inadequate resources, and a lack of meaningful opportunities for youth. Did it begin on the 6th of December, 2021? The answer is a resounding no. Madam Presiding Officers, these challenges are therefore not the creation of any single administration, nor can they be solved overnight. And while I'm on this point, I want to speak to, I don't have to call it an accusation, a grand charging, but misleading from the minority leader. I have in my possession emails from UDCOT dating as far back as 6th of April, 2022, a mere 4 months after we took office. And in one of those emails, I have correspondence after I inquired for a progress report on the WIM Youth Facility. A facility that began with Claudia Groom-Duke, and it went through several secretaries, including Whitney Alfred, Gary Melville, Huey Cadet, Kelvin Charles, Maslin Melville-Jack. Minority Leader said the project was almost 90% completed when we took office. I can read the entire letter, and I'm going to post that letter on social media to dispel the false claims from the Minority Leader. The project was only 69% complete. The project was left with a $1.6 million debt, not paid by the previous administration. And they had to contend with challenges where they had to switch contractors and several other administrative issues that stalled that project. I am going to place it on social media so we can dispel the many rumors. Next Friday, Madam Presiding Officer, this Secretary of Education will be recommissioning, along with my colleagues, the Kendall Aquatic Facility. I recently reposted photos on social media on the state we met that facility in upon assuming office. And what I should have done, Madam Presiding Officer, is reshared so the Tobago public would have seen the date I posted. I saw the political leader of the organization, the Tobago Council that is, on social media claiming that we met the facility in pristine condition and we were the ones that closed it because sometime in 2020, you are still seeing photos of activities occurring at that facility. And that is what this administration spent the last 3 years doing. Repairing, renovating, and being left to recommission shoddy work, poorly maintained work, incomplete work to complete at this point in time. And so when we speak about focusing on youth and youth development in Tobago and the challenges this administration currently are having to endure, I want the Minority Leader to be very, very honest with himself. You all did not do a good job at treating with youth and ensuring that our youth are protected here on this island. Madam Presiding Officer, while others, such as the Minority Council, politicize these issues, this administration, including our area representatives and 13 on this side, have been using their initiative, using limited resources to ensure that youth-based programs are run in their district. In my district, for example, Madam Presiding Officer, last July, August, I launched the Bethesda Lekito Junior Skills Training Camp. And I kind of wanted to do it out of my pocket, Madam Presiding Officer, almost as a pilot, to see how to work this initiative. It was a 2-week-long initiative and much celebrated. A lot of Tobagonians asked me, why can't this be a Division of Education collaboration with Division of ComDev, Youth Dev, and Sport? Because we see the value in our young persons from as early as 10 years old, and I may go earlier in this cohort this year, Madam Presiding Officer. But our young people were exposed to about 30 or so tech work areas, from beauty culture to auto mechanics to baking to farine making to smoked fish production, just name it. And they were all able to walk away with a certificate. Of course, not accredited, but of course, they saw the value in spending 2 weeks of their July-August vacation learning a skill, learning a trade. And so upon the successful completion of such an initiative, I have already made a proposal to my division, and a proposal that will also show some collaboration between ComDev, Youth Dev, and Sport, so this program can be run in all 15 electoral districts, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, I'm also pleased to announce that with collaboration with Division of ComDev, Youth Dev, and Sport, and I now see why education at one point in time had that youth and sport, because the collaboration is so clear. I'm going to have a youth fair on my table piece grounds. It's the only grounds in my electoral district at the moment, but very soon, of course, ComDev, Youth Dev, and Sport will also be assisting in us clearing some property at Culloden Estate, as Chief Secretary spoke to earlier, so Golden Lane could have this long-awaited, after 16 years of PNM in my electoral district. Finally, promises will materialize with that Culloden recreation facility. And so that skills fair, that youth fair, rather, again, as a pilot out of my own pocket, because I like to be able to see what works, what doesn't work before we utilize taxpayers' monies. And so, again, from February, this youth fair will offer young persons, and now we're going from the ages of 12 onwards, career guidance, financial literacy workshops, skill building sessions, and it will help our young people to gain the practical tools and knowledge they need to thrive. But let me just stop here for a bit, Madam Presiding Officer, because I don't think it's for want of these initiatives that we have these challenges. Because currently, at the Division of Community Development, Youth Development and Sport, we have programs where young persons have been graduating or matriculating out of. Lots of opportunities, and I saw Secretary hosted very recently a celebration of the achievements of persons through their world of work and the yes and so on. But we also have a revitalization of that Roxborough Trade Center, which I'm very proud to say we spent some time ensuring that that curriculum will fulfill the needs of our young persons. But on Island, YTEP, MIC, we have the facilities to give our young persons the opportunities. So something else is happening in society, and that is why I say there must be collaboration. And no one government, no one Tobago House of Assembly, no one entity can do it alone. Madam Presiding Officer, earlier the Chief Secretary spoke to some alarming statistics, which I also was privy to as Secretary of Education from USAID, and that revelation of the 8% of students in schools in Tobago that are participating in gang-related activities. But Madam Presiding Officer, behind those numbers are real lives. Children who are being drawn into cycles of crime, and most often out of desperation, a lack of attention, or a lack of opportunity. As Secretary of Education, I refuse to let this define Tobago's story. But Madam Presiding Officer, the fight cannot be waged by this THA administration alone. And so I want to make an urgent cry to parents. And I wanted to take the debate in a different direction, because even though we're calling on national security, I wanted to go in the direction of us taking responsibility for where we are as a country as it relates to crime. And so parents listening out now, this call is for you. It cannot be that with all the resources expended, we have parents who don't understand that they are the first teacher of the child. They are our children's first role models and their first line of defense. Madam Presiding Officer, I want our parents to take an active role in the lives of their children. I want our parents to know the friends of their children, to ask difficult questions, to open the lines of communication, and to guide them towards better choices. But we must admit that not every home would have a parent. We have some scenarios where an auntie, someone in a community who may just know that there are challenges in a particular home, may without signing on the dotted line adopt our children. And they may have children of their own. All right? And so we have to understand that everybody has to play that role of looking out for this island's children. Madam Presiding Officer, that is where the community steps in, and that adage of it takes a village to raise a child. And so we must come together as one Tobago. And I know one of my colleagues earlier said it. You couldn't walk down the street before and not say good afternoon to someone. Everybody in the community had that privilege to correct you. And you dare not go home and say so-and-so hit you. As a matter of fact, you're afraid to say it because more licks was waiting on you if you did. And so we have lost those values as a Tobago. And so we see why we are now on this upward trajectory of the upsurge in crime. Madam Presiding Officer, I want to point out some of the initiatives that I see in my district and I'm seeing across Tobago to show that we're on that right path, but I want some more collaboration. In my electoral district, in the first year, upon assuming the role of area representative, I called it a district cup, and I had football teams from every part of my district compete for a $10,000 out-of-pocket prize. And by the second year, I realized that the area representative doesn't always have to be out front. You can allow the district to come up with the format of whatever that competition is, and you do the sponsorship from the back. And so I told them I'm going to do a 1 year, area rep leads the charge. The next year, a community group leads the charge, and we do that back and forth. And so we've had some successful tournaments on our only recreation ground. We have a Golden Lane Police Youth Club, and I'm congratulating them now, that runs a very solid netball tournament. We have the Tobago Panthers, and they're going to be in Trinidad this weekend, pulling our young people into their hole, that pan side. And unfortunately, because of the upsurge of crime in Seaview Golden Lane, where their pan tent is located, they had to be relocated temporarily to the Golden Lane Government Primary School. Thank God their area representative is also Secretary of Education to grant them that. But they had the opportunity to use another space to be able to ensure that the young persons they house, giving them that opportunity to be able to do something else with their time. And of course, we are going to see them bring that trophy back home to Golden Lane this week. My colleague for the Tea and Tech East Side is on my, yes, so we are in a very healthy banter here. But the schools in my electoral district, and you would see me reposting with pride over and over again, Bethesda Government, Table Peace Government, Golden Lane Government, always on these anti-crime, anti-violence, anti-bullying walks, all right? And getting the communities through village councils, getting the communities through PTA, getting the communities through these police youth clubs, through fisher folk, through just bringing the community together, and not always having to depend on an area representative to lead the charge. And I want to congratulate not only my electoral district, but the electoral districts. I'm seeing a lot of good work happening in your district, your Zion youths. Everybody can speak to a community group that is taking the initiative and not just allowing the area representative to take responsibility for fixing the challenges. So, Madam Presiding Officer, as I said before, a community facility, because we just reopened one, recommissioned one there in Lekito. And then, of course, I'm eagerly awaiting the turning of the sod at the Culloden Recreation Facility, but facilities are not enough. A brand new spanking facility could be opened tomorrow. And if we don't fix the very fabric, the mere values of our communities, of this island, then we're still going to have the challenges. And so I want to say that no matter how much we accomplish as a Tobago House of Assembly, admittedly, we cannot do this alone. National security, therefore, remains the constitutional responsibility of the central government, and we must continue to hold them to account. Tobago has been under-resourced, and it's a fact. We cannot sweep it under carpet. Under-resourced in this area for far too long, and it's time we demand you send the resources and allow us to take charge of our national security issues, or you do better from Port of Spain. Madam Presiding Officer, the fact is we need more officers, we need better equipped law enforcement, we need better policing strategies tailored to suit our unique needs. And so politicizing crime, and I'm seeing it, I mean, it's so hypocritical, because in one breath you're asking us not to do it, but you're saying the upsurge began in 2021 when we took office, but national security is not our issue. So you're finding a way, and for every challenge raised here in Tobago, and that analogy or comparative analysis can also be taken overseas, over the waters rather. For every challenge brought by the minority leader, and with a timeline or a particular period of noticing an upsurge in crime, we can also say the same for Trinidad. And so that does not solve the problem. And so the accusations brought here by the minority leader are baseless. I think they're counterproductive to the conversations we need to have, and they distract from the work that needs to be done. And what I think Tobago needs now more than ever is not division, but unity. Tobago needs leadership, as we have in the Honorable Fali Chavez Augustine, that focuses on solution and not blame. Madam Presiding Officer, this is not just about that child, Berish Joseph, from my electoral district that we lost on the 4th of January 2025. This is about every child who deserves to grow up safe. It is about every parent who should never have to bury their child. It is about every community that deserves peace. And I want us to let the memory of Beres Joseph, who I hope is the only life we're going to lose here in Tobago, I want us to honor that memory by taking action. I want us to come together as area representatives, as communities, to reclaim this island called Tobago. I want us to rise up as one Tobago to ensure that our children can grow up safe, grow up free, and grow up be filled with a pride of an island that we all call home. I thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Assemblyman Augustine, you may now wrap up this debate.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. I want to start by thanking the honorable colleagues in this House for contributing to this motion. This, for me, was one of, and will be one of the best decisions taken in this House since perhaps the 44 years of the Tobago House of Assembly. We never thought at any point that Tobago will be a place where crime will be such an issue that it will take priority even over our 5th schedule items. We never thought that. Because for a long time, Tobago and Tobagonians, we went around with this notion that yes, Tobago is peaceful, yes, Tobago is quiet, Tobagonians are honest, Tobagonians don't get involved, and we buried our heads in the sand, and we put absolutely nothing in place to ensure that we prevent our children from becoming involved. And so at this juncture, it's more than just wetting our house because our neighbor's house probably done burned down already, and the fire is spreading. It's also about building up safety mechanisms. So, and I don't care if it's taken the wrong way, so that Tobago does not become like its sister island. Because that's not what we want. In fact, we want our sister island to become like us, insofar as levels of criminality. Today we heard from the minority. One was too ill-disciplined to even participate. In fact, he treats this house like if it's a morning walk. Come, scratch for 5 minutes, and go away to get his pay and make sure that he is on the register as being present. And then, from the minority leader, what we essentially heard is, well, we know that security is not your responsibility. We ain't sending no money for you to do anything about it. You don't have enough money to spend on national security. But although it's not your responsibility, I'm still blaming you for it happening. But I guess fault and folly both begin with F. And one of the things about leadership is that sometimes, even when the fault is not yours, you take up the responsibility for finding a solution. And this is what this motion is about. For a very long time, I've argued across the waters, do more for national security in Tobago. Do more for national security in Tobago. We heard from Secretary James what the spend on development is in Tobago. I'm not sure why our good friend from the sister island clearly felt the need to remind us that national security pay the salaries of their workers. That is the least. They get their salary, and some of them still waiting on their back pay and can't get it. So not even that they're paying properly. But this was a conversation about the development spend on national security in Tobago. The fact that the figures don't lie. In some instances, $0 assigned to Tobago for sometimes 2 years consecutively for development spend in Tobago, notwithstanding having billion-dollar budgets that outstrip the Tobago development budget spend. How you could run national security for the entire country, and one part of the country in a given year, you have $0 development spend as actual spend. What we are experiencing, what we experienced in 2024 didn't happen overnight. It happened because in 2022 and 2021 and those previous years, they were spending $0 on development spend on national security in Tobago. When you hear 5 police stations call out, 5 or however many, for just over $1 million to development spend, you want to know if it's only light bulb changing? When you hear just $1 million for a single fire station, and you know $1 million probably can't even buy a Prado these days, much more fire tender. How can you claim to care? But you see, I've long learned that there's a political party for which hypocrisy has found a home, and it's called the PNM. So while they refuse to blame Minister Hines and call him a failure, while they refuse to blame the head of the National Security Council and call him a failure, because our numbers are exceedingly high, you will come to Tobago and put the failure on someone who the law says shall not have responsibility for. And so what this motion seeks to do is to create a bridge between that which we shall not have responsibility for and actually saying, look, we ain't going to just take somebody blame, but we will take somebody responsibility because all you can't do the work. We're going to help all you out. But more than that, this is also about saying Tobago is our business. And if you in a very neo-colonial way retains responsibility solely and exclusively for our security, and you are refusing to do it to the extent that we are suffering, to the extent that gunmen running into our homes, shooting up our lanes on New Year's night, and all sort of stuff, then we have to just do something, law or no law, responsibility or no responsibility. And we live here, we have to do something about it. And it cannot be, leave it as it is, ego fix. Because you have been there for 10 years, 10 years consecutively, and the murder rate keeps going up and up and up. Tobago, which was once seen as extremely peaceful, is now suffering from high numbers as well. We can't allow it to get higher than that. And so we have to do all in our power, and the law allows that where there is a matter in the 6th schedule for which a ministry has responsibility, that some of that can be devolved through the use of an MOU. Before I close, Madam Presiding Officer, I want to make a few observations too. That notwithstanding this request to mandate the Chief Secretary to enter into MOU arrangements with the Minister of National Security, or rather the Ministry of National Security and the Tobago House of Assembly, there is still some legislative, or there are still some legislative issues for which the THA will still require the central government to treat with. One of those issues, Madam Presiding Officer, must be the issue of the laws governing marijuana usage in this country. Yes. We decriminalize marijuana up to over 30 grams. But we are yet to sit and to work out arrangements for the commercial aspect of it. And because there is that gap, Madam Presiding Officer, all of our young men, and even some of our young women, they always have 30 grams in their little satchel, the cross bag. And they will just keep topping up and selling, and it is fueling a sort of drug trade and a sort of cross-border gang warfare, and people fighting for space, and whether this area is 7 or this area is 6 or this is ABG and all sort of story. If we just simply, regardless of how you feel about marijuana, if we just simply take the legislation to the next extent, and because that was part of the conversation, it will remove the power from young boys in the street, but more than that, remove the power from the gang leaders, those who calling themselves presidents and higher than even the president of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. That's where we need to go. And so there is a lot of work to do. And perhaps devolving this responsibility to Tobago will finally free up some time for the Ministry of National Security so that they could actually go to the Parliament and do some work that they have to do. I also want to acknowledge and thank Assistant Secretary Clark for your presentation in the House today. It is not easy to be a victim of crime at that level, to lose a close relative at that level, and to have the strength to come to the House and in such warm layman terms explain what needs to be done. And if perchance you listen online and you don't understand through all my flowery language, you don't understand all the academic thoughts of Secretary James, I'm certain you understand Assistant Secretary Clark. Yes. And what he presented. I am certain about that. And I am certain, Madam Presiding Officer, that for some parent listening today, that they understand with greater clarity that here we have an island government asked to create and maintain social cohesion on the island, and yet we are asked to do so with our hands tied behind our backs. From where I sit, all the meetings I have with national security agents, from where I sit, Madam Presiding Officer, I can't instruct not one of them. I could give them ideas, and when they leave the room, they could just chew their teeth and do what they want. I have no say in what policy governs them at all, nor anybody in the Tobago House of Assembly. And I could tell you, we experienced it when we were doing the oil spill cleanup. At one time, we were asking for police to help close off certain roads, and the police refused to come and do it. Refused to come and do it. We had a crisis on the island, and we could not even direct policy to the point where we get them to come and close off the roads for us at Lambo. We end up using private security guards to do it, which should not have been the case. And so this motion is aimed at fixing all of that. But I want to end by saying to Tobagonians that we are not without hope. I want to say that we have not lost this battle against crime. And once this administration is here, we will not lose the battle against crime. Because we will not allow criminal elements to win. Not in this paradise. We will not lose our paradise to a few. We will not. And there are times even when listening to those opposite, and listen to how we are still being told boats on dry dock, and they're on dry dock for years now. Because I hear that in 2022 when I come, I hear it in 2023, I hear it in 2024, and in 2025, we're still hearing boat on dry dock. I don't know if it's Noah's Ark they're trying to fix. Must be Noah's Ark. And in my mind, there is a class of people in this country who are benefactors, who benefit from the high levels of crime, who benefit from the drugs and the guns, and they're powerful enough to ensure that what needs to be done by national security is not done so that they can continue their trade. I am convinced of that. I am convinced of that. Nobody could tell me otherwise. Because nobody could tell me how billions in a development budget for national security, and we still can't get not even a little pirogue to circumnavigate Tobago. But we are not a people without hope. And it means, therefore, Tobago and Tobagonians, we have work to do. Law or no law, whether the ministry accepts our MOU or not, whether they accept our overtures or not, I wish to be clear to Tobagonians that this administration will do whatever is necessary, even if they accuse us of breaking the law, to do it, to ensure our people remain safe. Because that is a priority for our people. I want to once again thank all the members who contributed. I want to thank members in this house who have also gone above and beyond to do work themselves, such as Assistant Secretary Baines, who has been mobilizing the Christian community ever so often to ensure that they do the needful and to put God in charge of this island and to talk to him and communicate to him on behalf of the rest of the population. And I want to end by saying that while it might be the intention of some to spoil, to disrupt, to ensure that there is a stillbirth of the dream of having the greatest little island on the planet by facilitating criminal activity, I want to be clear. And we just came out of the Christmas season, that which is to be birthed will not just be birthed, but it will live. The dream of the greatest little island on the planet is well birthed, and it shall live, and Tobago shall become that. And we will return to peace and safety. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Honorable members, the question put is, whereas the right to security and the right to life are fundamental human rights enshrined in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, and whereas the people of Trinidad and Tobago are currently facing a state of emergency, SOE, due to escalating levels of crime and violence, with Tobago experiencing a significant increase in criminal activity, which has disrupted the island's customary peace and safety. And whereas national security is listed in the 6th schedule of the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996 as a matter over which the Assembly has no responsibility, and whereas the Tobago House of Assembly, despite not being responsible for formulating or implementing policy on national security, has nonetheless provided resources to assist with national security matters in Tobago. And whereas the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996 encourages mutual consultation and collaboration with the central government through mechanisms embedded in Section 26, 31, and 37, and whereas the central government has not allocated sufficient resources for national security on the island of Tobago, thereby compromising the safety and security of its residents and adversely affecting the island's tourism industry, business environment, and overall well-being. Be it resolved that this House, as a matter of urgency, mandates the Chief Secretary to call for a meeting with the Minister of National Security to immediately establish a memorandum of understanding pursuant to Section 26 of the Tobago House of Assembly Act, aimed at devising proper and effective strategies for national security in Tobago. And be it further resolved that this House calls on the central government to urgently increase the allocation of resources to Tobago for maintenance, upgrade, and modernization of its national security infrastructure, including personnel, equipment, facilities, and technology tailored to the island's unique needs. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against, say no. The ayes have it. Motion carried.
Private business. Motion.
Honorable members, before we go into private members' business, we are closely approaching 8 o'clock. Can the House decide whether we are going to continue on with private members' motion or we break for 10 minutes for dinner and resume within 10 minutes' time? Leader of Assembly Business?
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, I'm uncertain if 10 minutes would be adequate for dinner. However, I do appreciate the fact that we may need to use the washrooms, etc. So I propose that we have a 10-minute break and we return to the chambers to dispense with the business of the order paper until there is another period where we think we may need a break.
Honorable members, the question is that we break for 10 minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any against, say no. The ayes have it. Honorable members, this House now stands suspended for 10 minutes.
Welcome back to Tobago. The 2025 series of democratic debates kicks off with a double header. We have two motions for deliberation. Minority Leader Kelvon Morris is calling for an audit into the procurement process and the execution of 4 major road projects on the island. Mr. Morris is also calling for the Public Accounts Committee to be immediately convened to urgently review these expenditures. Chief Secretary Farley Augustine will also lay a motion calling on the Minister of National Security to establish a memorandum of understanding on effective strategies for the island's security and increase in the allocation of resources to Tobago to maintain, upgrade, and modernize national security infrastructures. Thursday, January 23rd from 1:30 p.m. You're welcome to come in and look on or log on to our social media spaces to witness the action. Either way, don't miss it.